Today in the studio we have Jim van Geet, a remarkable artist. He's going to tell us all about that in a moment. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, let's first talk about your early life.
Good. Okay. Was born in Amsterdam. Came to Australia as a youngster back in the late 50s. Came to Australia with my parents and my sister. Couldn't speak a word of English. Learned very quickly though, and developed from there. Did all my schooling here, or most of my schooling here, and it's been an interesting journey so far.
So somewhere in your life you got into art. How did that come about?
It's an interesting question. There's a school of thought that says some artists are born and others are made, and I think it's really a combination of both of those. Artists are wired somewhat differently from other people. They really are, and it's in your bones. I always felt a compulsion to paint, to draw, to do all those artistic things, and that started at a very early age, and it's just continued on.
How important is art in society, Jim?
Art really is at the core of society. It's essential. It's a language. It's just another language. It's probably our oldest form of communication. If you think back, the drawings on the caves of Lascaux in France, 50,000 years old, they communicated that way. It's another language, and it really is at the core of everything. It's what shapes societies, and governments worldwide have recognised this in the form of the fact that they also, China for example, says there are two ways to control a people. One is with weapons, and another one is in art and culture. If you remove the art and culture from a society, you effectively destroy it. And we see that witnessed in the Cultural Revolution, the French Revolution, the Nazi regime. They've all done that. So they've recognised a need to control it, saying basically, yes, it is at the forefront of what we consider ourselves to be as a society.
So with all these messages in art, Jim, what is your personal contribution?
Art has always been considered to be the chronicler of society. So we know the historical paintings that tell us what society was like before. We know it from the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, all previous societies. So we can do that. We do that. We are giving with our art. We're telling the story of life as it is today, and we'd like to think that in the future sometime that what we paint today and what they see, paint, sculpt, anything creative, tells the future something about us as a people, and that's what we try to do. I certainly do.
So like all artists, Jim, there's a message behind your work, is there not?
Well, firstly, because my bent is really for figurative and portrait work, so I'm basically coming to what that person is like in our society today. As well as that, there's some social paintings that I will do, social commentary type works, if you like. Somewhat subtle, some not so subtle, but basically really just telling people what's happening today, some of the stories that we can tell. Good paintings should have a narrative. And that's what I try to do in those types of paintings, basically to tell a story about how life is today.
You're a fascinating man. Now, do you think we might have a look at some of those paintings of yours?
Certainly. think one of the recent social commentary ones that I did, which features a young teenage girl sitting on a bench playing with her iPhone or her mobile phone, totally engrossed in what she's doing, sitting next to an older Middle Eastern gentleman. And I like that, the opposites there. They may be known to each other, they may not, but they're each engrossed in their own things, but they are certainly working together. There's no disharmony there. That's what the things I like to do, is portray society as it is today. Again, another one of those is a couple of Asian gentlemen, quite animatedly having a discussion about some, whatever it is. It could be political, it could be social, it could be family, it doesn't matter, but it's that interaction between the two people. That's that's saying something about our conversations.
Let's take another message that you've got. Let's pick another painting that has another message, a different one. Let's go through a selection of them.
As I say, I like to paint people, portrait work. As well as that, I also do a lot of figurative work with dancers. They know how to move, they know how to pose. It's that wonderful movement that you can get in a painting. I have one there which is a wonderful cross form of two black dancers. Wonderful bodies, very lithe, holding a particular pose, very, very difficult to hold. It's more a depiction. Again, it's a depiction of movement from one stage to another, and it's that interaction again between the two dancers. She's letting him hold her, and she's trusting totally in him. Again, it's that conversation, that language between the two of them. There was a lovely one of a brilliant singer, Lucy Gale, and she's got a magnificent voice. She also has a wonderful stage presence, and I've painted her in both front and rear profile, so that what you're looking at is a reflection in the mirror. In this particular one, I used gold leaf. It's a very large painting, and it's basically life-size. It's all of the background is in gold leaf, and then embellished upon that. Very technically quite difficult to do, and that's where I like the challenge. And capturing her particular persona, her personality. Mm-hmm. That all of that came out. There's also some silver leaf on the dress. A very satisfying painting. This is the fascinating thing about art. It's such a socially equal type profession. I recollect being at art school. This was a private art school after college. That seeing all the different people next to each other. There would be a doctor there would be a 15-year-old student, there would be a builder's labourer standing next to a banker, all talking the same language. One is an old sea dog next to one of the old ships, which was actually one of the early Sea Shepherd ships, and he was just sitting on one of the bollards, and one of the wharf workers came up to chat to him, wanting to find out his story. Again, this is the dialogue, this is the language of people speaking to each other. The new guy fascinated with what the old fellow had to say. I like to paint large, but they come off quite well. I'm thinking of a writer whom I had some contact with. In fact, he went to school with my sister, and I managed to catch up with him, but he was going to sit, but it just didn't happen at the time because he had some internal demons that needed to be resolved. He phoned me sometime after that, after he'd had the treatment, and came up and stayed with me. He then wrote the first part of his story, his fight with depression, alcohol abuse and all of that. That gave me wonderful insights into what made him. From that I did a painting which was entitled Bankst, Story of a Recovering Depressive. He was coming out of it. I've put at the background the book which was later published that he started to write at my studio, and the things that the writing in the back is actually part of that story. It also displays his comfort zone, which is the arms crossed, and he's just stepping out of that and back into society. It was his journey back into society, which thankfully he has done, but it's been a long journey. Those are the things I like to depict. I like to get into the personality, the psyche, the soul of the person. That I probably spend more time talking to them and finding out what makes them tick than I do painting them. It gives me a full story.
You know, I love your painting, Jim. It's fantastic work. But I tell you what is almost equally as interesting is the story behind it. What was in your mind when you painted that picture?
Yes, I did one last year, which was Justice Betty King of the Supreme Court of Victoria. She's a lady who well known within the law circles, extremely well known. She's the one who sits on a lot of the very, how can I say, grittier cases, such as the underbelly type work. Immensely intelligent, wonderful erudite lady, beautiful conversationalist. She has a great insight into society, even with that, and a wonderful optimist. She's also very secure within who she is herself, and always has been. Some would regard her rather flamboyant, the way she dresses, the way she is, but she is so secure within her own personality, and that was something that I portrayed in that particular painting again, where she is reclining at home after a hard day at the office. She's reclining at home in a chair, very comfortable, totally at ease with herself, dressed the way she likes to dress, which is what makes her comfortable. Again, in this case, again, I used a gold leaf background. It brought out a lot of things, and compositionally, it's also created that way. Spent some really good time discussing things with her.
So really, Jim, your art wouldn't be complete, would it, if you hadn't sort of included some of your early life? I believe children are favourites of yours.
I certainly did a lot of drawing of them. Because they sit there whilst they're engrossed watching TV or something. It's the only time you'll get them to sit still. So I do have some of those. One was a very, very early one of watching my oldest son, who would sit there watching TV. It's actually only a charcoal drawing, but it captures, and I thought at the time, of him just sitting there totally engrossed in something far away.
That's important.
Yeah. I have another one of daughter in a pink tutu. That was what she was doing, just in the dancing. They're the ones you try to capture who they are, essentially. When
you're painting, do you ever use a still camera to pick a shot that gives you that motion you can pick from? Do you use the camera at all?
I do. It's and I don't know many artists these days who don't. With the advent of digital photography, it's made it so much easier. I don't copy from them, they're reference. It's a tool. It's a tool like your brushes, like your paints, like your palette. It's just another tool. One of the problems that we have with a lot of the younger artists these days is that they slavishly copy from it. Look, it's a tool. Use it as you need to, only as a reference, but not until you can actually work without it.
Yes. What about landscaping? Have you got landscapes?
Oh yes, I do have landscapes, and yes, certainly I did a lot of landscapes. Wildlife, animal paintings, certainly as well.
Let's have a landscape example. One of your favourites.
One of the favourites was a field. I called it Fields of Gold because it was Mount Bogong in the background. The snow was just coming off. It was early spring. So it was that sort of a feeling. Yes, yeah. With landscapes, you try to get the atmosphere.
Now let's come back. You're still live as an earlier stage. What are you currently working on?
Currently I'm working on the next paintings for the Archibald. I've got a flight to Sydney for that, and that's the one that I'm working on now. I also have another couple of paintings on the easel as well. I usually have about 3 paintings on the easels.
So which art competitions have you entered your work in?
Most of the larger portrait ones, which would be the Archibald, the Moran, the Black Swan, the Percival, the Shirley Hannon. These are all the larger portrait prizes.
Could we have an example of one of those?
Last year was a finalist in the Moran Portrait Painting Prize, which is Australia's richest prize, had 150,000 first prize. So that was quite gratifying. It's always gratifying to be selected as a finalist. It's you're up there with your peers, and that is rather gratifying. Winning it is it's a bit of a tatlo, I think. But it's just staying there at that sort of standard.
Could you describe this $150,000 win, and what was the painting about?
The win or my entry? The win was something else. The entry, yes, that was a painting I did of Charles Billage.
Yes.
Charles Billage, the artist.
Yes.
Very wonderful man, lovely guy, extremely good artist. He's been somewhat pilloried in this country by the critics, possibly because he is extremely financially successful at what he does and accepted worldwide. He's a guy who travels the world, does a lot of commission work. Whenever I converse with him on the mobile somewhere, he's either in Monte Carlo or New York or Mexico or somewhere like that. He's a very widely travelled man. The painting I did again, that was quite a large one, nearly 2 metres by 2 metres. The background is a compilation of a lot of his different paintings. They're not copies of his paintings, they just allude to his paintings, so they're monochrome, and he is sitting, as one might say, on a pedestal in the front. Charles is a very flamboyant person, and I've chosen to depict him in one of his favourite tops, which is bright red, so it really stands out. And yeah, it's who he is. It's his persona.
This is most remarkable. I'm thoroughly enjoying just the stories behind these things. I think that's almost as interesting as watching the picture. Now this is a big one, Jim. Where do you see art heading?
Oh, it's a huge one.
Exactly.
As Charles Dickens said in his prelude to Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times and it's the worst of times. We have so many tools at our disposal now. We have all the past to build on, and that's what's called progress. We learn from the past, we utilise it, we take the best bits of it, and we build on that. And we have the opportunity to do that. I think certainly the last half, at least, of the last century, was spent in the arts institutions trying to destroy a lot of that work from the past, by calling it irrelevant, by calling it old-fashioned and so forth. But what they've done in the process is then destroy the skills that are needed to build upon. I do, I guess, what's called contemporary realism, which is working in a realist manner but of today. There is a great resurgence, back to that, thank heavens, of skill-based art. People are becoming a little tired of the splotches thrown at a canvas from 50 metres. They want to see some value in it. They want to see skill. They would like to see that the person who created that work of art knew what the heck they were doing and had the technical ability as well as the creativity to create something beautiful or make a statement. So the future of art, 10, 15 years ago, you didn't see the older system of the ateliers, which was where you had a master artist with a lot of pupils who would then spend the next 5, 6, 7 years learning the skills and acquiring the technical abilities to do what they needed to do. That's flourished, especially in the States. The United States is probably at the forefront of that. And these new ateliers are springing up everywhere, with master artists at their head, so that you're seeing a new crop of young artists who are able to turn their hand to anything they want to. It's not a matter of just painting gum trees and sheep. These are people who are superbly skilled, It's really wonderful to see.
Now, with all your experience, Jim, what advice would you give to a young artist just starting out?
One of the old cliched sayings is in the arts is make sure you have a good day job. Because it's a tough road.
Yes.
You have to be dedicated.
Yes.
You have to be passionate. Good artists, real artists are passionate. They love what they do. Embody integrity in your art. Don't just sell out because you can make a lot of money out of doing what you think the public wants to see.
And this is exactly what you're doing, isn't it? You're saying, I don't want to be in that top bracket, doing it the way everybody wants it. I want to do art my way.
Art for art's sake, for the improvement of art, for the progress of art.
Exactly.
Not just because you can paint something that you know is going to just be decoration on the wall.
Yes.
Look, decoration on the wall is fine, but don't confuse it with fine art. You know, it is what it is, which is decoration for a wall. Splotches will always be splotches. They don't convey a message other than it looks nice with the furniture. Fine art is more about having a message, showing some skill, showing that they were serious about what they were doing. Look, the average person, the average man in the street recognises realist art. They don't relate to the splotches. So, yeah, this is where it's a language, you know, the language of art that the average person can understand.
I know you've done lots of canvases, but we could call it a very large canvas, could we not, of your life's work. What's your favourite?
Well, I was asked recently at a solo exhibition of mine, which is your favourite painting? And I said, my next one.
What a wonderful answer. Jim, this has been a wonderful experience, and thank you very much for being on the show, Jim, and I trust that in the future we can bring you back and have another chat.
Be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.